What's up, summoners? King Blair here. With the new expedition update, these expeditions have become so important, and today we're going to be doing a guide on the Earth Expedition Blooming Snag Glitch. This is some of people's least favorite expedition, and a lot of people find this one to be the hardest. Well, I'm here to tell you it's actually going to be one of the easiest if you have the right units. So that's going to be the big thing for this one. This is a very unit dependent fight. If you have the right units, you'll be getting tons of damage on this boss, and it's not going to be super hard for you. The other thing to remember with all the expeditions is you don't need to have a team that's super optimized, that's getting 300 million, right? All you need is about 350k to 400k consistently. The higher, the better, and you are set. The team I will show you for my own team that I'll show later on is going to be a non-optimized team, and if you optimize, you can get way more damage, and you guys will see it does not take that much. It's just having the units, having some gear on them, and understanding the boss mechanics. So as far as how the video will play out is, first we're going to be talking about the different teams, then the artifacts that the heroes can use, and then ultimately me showcasing you my very non-optimized team that still is able to do the work quite well, and ultimately the gear on that unit. But without further ado, let's get right into it, starting with the boss mechanics. So as far as the boss mechanics, the first one's going to be the base stats. It's 100 effectiveness, so you do need 85% effectiveness to land your debuffs properly, and hopefully you land all of them. The other one that all expeditions share is the enhanced end element and abnormal atmosphere. Basically, you have 7 turns to kill the boss before he just wipes your party. For this boss in particular, it is the 3rd time that it does the ultimate. That 3rd time will kill you. The other thing is, if you don't have fire heroes, they're taking a ton of damage in this boss, 80% extra damage. But if you have fire heroes, they do 50% extra damage, making fire very important. The other one is going to be the neurotoxin. This one's particularly for this one. It is based on the ultimate, and it applies an effect that does 90% of your health as damage if you don't have the cleansing. As you see there, he cleanses your boss and applies neurotoxin. The way you get rid of this is with this very massive thing and the other extra unit that you see there. He starts with skill nullifier for 5 turns, and you need to use AoE attacks to hit the boss. Because it does extra damage to the boss by an extra 70%, as well as hitting the skill nullifier, which you need to do to get the immunity. With the immunity that you can get from the side boss, you get an immunity for 2 turns that will stop the neurotoxin that the ultimate on the boss does. So here you see we hit the extra add 1 time, he gives us the immunity, and we're not going to take that neurotoxin damage when the boss does the ultimate afterwards. The other one for the regular attacks is going to be Soul Divide, which essentially is that one that attacks the front line. It can attack 2 times if they're below 50%, so make sure your front line is a tank that can take it on and will not drop below 50%. And last but not least, the S2 that hits everyone and increases attack. This one is particularly dangerous, and is the reason why it is very dangerous to take non-fire heroes, because it does quite a lot of damage and applies a lot of poison effects that can kill you, and you need out support. So as far as the team composition and the units you can use for this expedition, so as mentioned in the mechanics, you are going to need a knight in the front line to tank the S1 that can actually do a ton of damage if you don't have a tanky enough knight. One other thing that you're really going to need is area of effect, or AoE. This means heroes that target multiple allies with their skills. So things like Kayron, like Arbiter Vildred, that their skills have multiple allies are going to be better for this expedition. So kind of let's going through with the best to okay from left to right. Now this does not mean this is all the characters you can use. There's other characters you can definitely use. These are just the recommended ones that you can use for this expedition. So with the front line, Ross, Lilias, and Charlotte. Ross being a free-to-play, being amazing for this. He's able to set up increased defense, which is an AoE attack that can hit the frontline crystal. The S2 that is so good at doing damage, doing decreased defense, and setting up immunity. And the S1 that can also strip the attack buff that the boss will have. He's amazing for this expedition, probably the best one you can do, and everyone has access to him. The second one, Lilias, again, the dual attack potential is very good. The S3 being able to cleanse those poisons will drop the damage that the boss is capable of doing, and the S2 makes her considerably tankier, allowing you to carry an Aureus on her. Charlotte, the most aggressive option that you have. If she's hit, which she will since she's a frontliner, she will always have that attack buff and defense buff, allowing you to do a ton of damage AoE. So she doubles not only as a knight, but also as an AoE damage dealer, making her so great for this expedition. As far as the supports or buffer, the best one that you can have is going to be Mascot Hazel. Again, another unit that everyone has access to. Why? She does so much healing, and since your whole team is going to be fire, her skill will give you greater attack buff to your fire allies. The amount of damage that you can do with her is ridiculous. It is so good. The heals are great, and the damage she'll be doing is probably the highest out of all the supports. Tema still works here. She has great heals. She's still able to go into idle form and cleanse some of the debuffs that you'll see in my runs. And she's able to dual attack with your highest attack ally. You don't get this CR push, but it's still quite nice to have the Tema for the dual attacking for later on. Although you only will really get to idle form once or twice this fight. And then of course Achates, if you don't have any of these other ones and you just want someone that can cleanse and give your team support, Achates is nice. Your team won't be dying, you just won't have any attack buffs, which can hurt you, but it's not necessary, as you'll see with some of the other heroes that can do tons of damage to the boss. So as far as the primary DPS and the debuffer, so this one, the primary DPS, is someone that's going to be doing damage and can also be someone that can debuff. So the best two that you can use for both the debuffer and the damage are going to be Ball. Yes, Ball. That fire dude, he's actually insane for this one because his S1 hits 2 allies. His S3 decreases defense, decreases speed, which is just the best debuffs you can have. He just does all the debuffing on his own on one skill. That's a very low cooldown. And his S2 is also AoE. He just has so much damage potential, so many debuffs. The S1 hits, the S2 is AoE, everything's AoE that he has in his kit, allowing you to do insane amount of damage to the boss while also doing debuffs. Tenebria, kind of in the same alleyway, her S3 gives herself attack buff and is able to decrease defense, and it does tons of damage. And the S2 also has that slow capabilities, but again, 2 really strong AoE attacks, and as we'll see with an artifact later with Radiant Forever, their damage goes to just insane levels. Kayron, a unit that even on this boss, his AoE is just so great. As long as he has a buff, you'll be able to do the S1. So if you pair him up with Ross, he'll always have immunity and increase defense, making him really good with Ross. And if you give him something like Dust Devil, you'll be able to proc the S1 several times, giving you huge damage potential. You can still have the S3 that's only single target damage for 1 turn, but sometimes that can help you set up your combos properly. The other unit is going to be Arbiter Villager, one of the only non-fire heroes you can actually use for this one because his S1 hits 2 targets. That makes it really good, and the S3, again, being really high damage. He has a ton of damage potential with Arbiter Villager. A lot of people like to use Arbiter Villager, and you can just use the one you already use for your PvP. Mercedes, another good one, another mage that can do extra damage on AoE, another mage that is just really good damage. The only thing compared to her versus Tene and Ball is she does not provide any support aside from damage. Holiday Youthfiend, she needs a very specific build, but again, all her skills are AoE. She gives greater attack buff to herself, and she cleanses debuffs, making you be able to survive a little longer from the poisons. And Sermia, shockingly, the only single target damage here. She's not the best, but if you have a lot of AoE in your team, she actually does still pretty good damage with the S1 that does extra damage. Not the best recommended, but still can do a ton of work. And then as far as the debuffer DPS, again, we mentioned Ball, we mentioned Tene, they have all the debuffs, they have all the damage. Champ C can also do decreased defense and can hit back since he does have the poisons with that S1, and depending the artifact you give him, he can do extra damage with the Tene artifact, or it just depends what you want to use on him, and his S1 is also always AoE. And Lidica, who can also slow the enemy. And while she may not be able to do a ton of damage, she can still put that slow, which is very, very critical for this boss. But that is going to be it for the team building for this portion. As far as some artifacts for the heroes that I discussed briefly, for the front line, Adamant Shield's always nice since this boss does do quite a bit of damage. It's always good to have that extra little bit damage mitigation for both your front line and the rest of your team. I would not recommend Aureus for this one, mainly because there's a lot of damage from the dots, and if your front line is taking too much damage, that's going to cause the Lich to attack him twice, which will chunk your front line quite fast, so you don't want to have that one. You can also use something like Sword of Ezra that allows you to tank a lot harder if you're having problems with your front line surviving. If you're using Charlotte, you can just use one of the damage artifacts. That's it for the front line. As far as the supports, I personally went with a Celestine to increase the healing capabilities of my team, especially since Tema does tend to do her S1 a lot. You have other options that can help you. You can use Shimada Staff to also do more heals. You can also do things like Stella Harpa to reduce a couple of the debuffs. You can do Touch of Red Cost because usually the AoE attacks are the ones that do a lot of damage, and you can heal your whole team. There's a lot of different artifacts you can use for your Soul Weaver to help you with the healing. If you're not struggling with the healing, you also do have the damage artifacts, which are the common ones that you can have. Something like Carda's Smart Miracles that just gives your team a full stat and defense boost if you're not having trouble keeping up your heals. That is definitely a good option for you. As far as the DPSs, if it's a mage DPS, what you want to put on them is going to be none other than either Kaldra. So this is the one right here, Kaldra, that does extra damage on debuff targets. Since you do have to put debuffs on the Lick quite often, this one will be very, very good. And of course, the other one would be Radiant Forever. Since both Ball and Tenebria use AoE skills to do damage, and you get extra damage on the boss when you do AoEs, this will just boost your damage to ridiculous numbers. So I highly recommend Radiant Forever for your AoE DPS. As far as if you're using Kayron, I highly recommend using something like the Dust Devil to be able to do the double AoE with Kayron, which will do tons of damage and help you do a bunch of stuff. For the other DPSs, any other DPS artifact works. That's just the best ones for some of the ones I talked about. And yeah, that's some artifacts you can use that will definitely help your runs be a lot stronger. So for this run, I wanted to show a non-perfect run to show you guys how it can still do very well even if it's not as consistent. So see here I have the Ross and the Funlight giving the increased defense and also hitting with the AoE attack. We have the Tenebria who's supposed to decrease defense, but as you'll see later, she's not optimized and actually misses the decreased defense, and she will miss it almost every time this fight. Right, so that's something that's very important. The Kayron is not on the right artifact, as you'll see later on. But I wanted to show you guys this because it's not a bad fight, and why Ross is so good. As you see there, he can apply that decreased defense even if the Tenebria does miss it, which does make Ross one of the reasons why I like him so much for this one. The biggest thing that you'll see here is I've speed tuned my team to hit the side boss, the skill nullifier, at the right time with the right number of AoEs. As you see there, he's still quite a bit away from reaching the ultimate, where he applies the Neurotoxin, right? So here we see the Kayron, he does the S1, doesn't quite kill the enemy, but that's good because I still need a whole rotation. So I get to reset some cooldowns, and here the Ross is the one that pops it, but is at the perfect time because my whole team will keep that Neurotoxin for 2 turns, so we will not be dying to the boss in this scenario. He'll go for it. He does hit everyone, but again, you see there, we have the right thing. The Tama is also speed tuned to remove all the poison effects there and reset our team with a nice little heal and give us attack buff. Here the Ross does miss. As you'll see, he's not optimized. He doesn't have the right effectiveness. And Tenebria will miss that decreased defense again and not crit. You guys can see where I am missing a lot of damage if my units actually were able to hit, but we're still going to get well over the minimum that we need, right? So that's why I say that this expedition is actually not a hard one, because you just need to have the right units and have decent gear on them, and they'll do more than enough work, right? So again, the other thing is going to be the speed tuning. As you see there, we still haven't hit the boss. We are still not hitting him here, which will allow us to have, for the most part, our team with the neurotoxins, right? So here the Ross will pop it. Both the Kayron and the Tenebria will have it for 2 turns. They should be able to keep it. They're not going to lap the boss twice. The Tama, though, may actually lose it. But the Ross for sure is going to be... for the most part, they're most likely going to keep it, which is what you want to have so you don't take tons of damage. So here we see the Tama does outspeed, and she will be taking neurotoxin damage. But it's not that big of a deal if the Tama gets it, because she'll be able to just heal herself the next turn. So again, this is the one decreased defense that I actually land. One of the reasons why you need to have the Tene Molagora, the S3, and why you need more effectiveness on it, so she lands those more often. As you see there, Neurotoxin, not the end of the world. You just need to be able to have a healer go right after if you mess up the timing, but still pretty important. Here we get the Tene putting that slow. We get the Kayron doing some nice little damage. Finally starting to do good damage since we have the decreased defense. The Ross doing the damage. The Tama here will be able to do one last S1 and dual attack with Kayron. As you can see, Kayron with Dust Devil could have a higher damage potential. And of course, the other reason I like Kayron is because you get to cheese out a little bit more damage, since he does have that immortality that lets him cheese out more damage. But we get more than enough damage, even though it was a non-optimal run. So you can see why you need to have a good speed tuning, but you should still be able to do quite a good job in the expedition and do your minimum requirement. And now we'll see the actual units I use, how they're not optimized at all, and how you can make your team way better than mine with a lot of the other units that we talked about and a lot of the other artifacts that I'll talk about later, and kind of breaking down all the different equipments. So let's get over to the actual units I used. Alright, so let me show you the units that I actually used for the expedition. Now, I do want to point out, again, my team is not optimized at all. You guys are going to see these units, and you're going to be like, oh, I see what you're saying, King Blair. That's terrible, right? The only unit that's actually really strong is my Ross. But again, this is a PvP Ross. I use him primarily for PvP. I did not build him for this expedition. It happened that he worked very well with the speed that he had. But if it was an expedition Ross, he would have 85% effectiveness, because that's what you would want from a PvE Ross, right? So this is a PvP Ross, which is why he has not even 50% effectiveness. So if you wanted your PvE, you'd bump up the effectiveness. All the other stats are very, very nice. He tanks, as you guys saw. Tanks quite easily. Never gets the double proc from the S1 from the Blooming King Lich. As far as my Kayron, this Kayron is not too hot right now. There's a lot of work I need to do on him. He doesn't have two pieces reforged. Primarily purple gear, nothing crazy, nothing really stands out about this Kayron. It's just a very standard Kayron, very slow, which is why he doesn't even, he needs to have like a little bit more speed so he can go right after Tenebria. And of course, he doesn't have even the exclusive equipment he's supposed to have, which is the S1 that does extra damage, and Dust Devil, which is the way you get the most damage out of the Earth Expedition. So again, not an optimized unit, still able to do the required minimum, right? So you guys easily, with the right artifacts, can do way more damage than I'm doing. The Tamarine, it's an overall PvE Tamarine. Again, effectiveness, not even 85%, which would be nice to have to be able to strip the attack buff, which would be really nice to be able to do that, but I didn't build her for that, right? So that's not her primary purpose that I use her in, and she still does her job quite well. She heals with Celestine, very, very nice, does her job as a support. And then ultimately, we have Tenebria. Look at this. This is terrible. This is a terrible Tenebria. It's actually garbage. I need to upgrade so much about her. Her sword, her helmet, her artifact. She's not even fully awakened. Doesn't even have the mola that she needs. But she has the doesn't even have the effectiveness, right? Which is why I need to finish upgrading this stuff. So if I bump up the effectiveness, I can increase the consistency and have consistent 500 to 800 plus if I was to actually max out my Tenebria, right? So again, you don't need very high investment for this expedition. That's all I want to show you guys with this team. I'm not trying to show you guys a team that's super well optimized, that's super broken. I'm trying to show you guys that you guys can do this expedition. So hopefully seeing these units and seeing what you could go from here and what you can actually get to be able to do the bare minimum, right? This is just the bare minimum, is the 400k that I showed. So that is it for this section. Now let's move on to the conclusions. So that is all I have for you guys today for the Blooming Snag Lich. As you can see, my team, while not consistent right now because I have not maxed my Tenebria or optimized my Kayron for damage or my Ross, still is able to do well above the 350 minimum, which shows that you can do these expedition level 3s, y'all. They are not that hard. Just make sure you build a couple of units. I know it's a unit check, I know it's annoying, but just build them, put some gear on them, and get to doing some expeditions. You will not regret it, and you'll be able to get so many more resources. But that's all I got for you guys today, and I will see y'all in the next one, which will be the Dark Expedition. Peace.